of the underrated features of survival horror games, especially the classics, are the ways that each of the games of the genre try to find interesting and unique ways to manually save your progress. See, in most traditional survival horror games, you can't rely on autosaves after every single time you open a door or enter a new area. Instead, you'll need to reach a point in the game in which you can access a save room, or at the very least, complete the current chapter. So on today's episode of Nerd Space Games, we're having a little fun today, as I'll be giving you guys 10 save methods in survival horror games that are the most memorable for me. Obviously, this is just a fun video, so don't take things too seriously, and also note that this is of course my personal favorites, so be sure to hit up the comments with any methods that I completely ignored in today's video. Before we get started though, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerd Space Games, and this is 10 iconic save methods in survival horror games. Let's get it. Number 10, old-fashioned camera, fatal frame. It might not seem like much, but considering the theme of the fatal frame series and the mechanics of this save method compared to other survival horror games, makes the old-fashioned camera one of the most logical and memorable save methods in a survival horror game. The Fatal Frame series is different from other survival horror games in the way that it exchanges guns and bullets for a camera and different types of film. Essentially, the player is forced to face different ghosts head-on in order to defeat them by taking pictures of them. However, one thing that makes this save method different from a lot of the other save methods on today's list is that you're not actually safe when you're attempting to save per se. In fact, you could be attacked before you reach the camera, and if a ghost does show up in a room where a camera is in it, you won't be able to save until you deal with the ghost first. This could make things a little more tense for those of us that find ourselves going a long period of time without saving, only to then be attacked by a ghost before we could reach the camera. Trust me, I've been there. Number 9, Lantern, Amnesia the Bunker. So I do want to preface this next one by saying that it's really only as exciting and interesting if you use the custom difficulty settings or play on the shell shock difficulty. That's because unlike previous entries of the series, Amnesia the Bunker leans much deeper into survival horror territory instead of the traditional walking horror simulator that the franchise was built upon. And in this game, you'll have to collect fuel to keep the lights on in the bunker or risk allowing the beast to roam freely and find you in the dark. On the harder difficulties though, there are no autosaves, and instead you have to rely on manually saving the game by lighting the lantern in one of the 2 save rooms, again depending on the difficulty. However, you can make this more thrilling by taking it a step farther by creating limited saves for yourself. See, by adjusting the custom settings of the game or just by playing on shell shock mode, lighting the lantern will cost precious fuel. Yeah, that same resource that you use to power the generator in the bunker, yeah, that fuel. This essentially creates a risk versus reward situation for you, as you'll now need to decide what's more important throughout the game at different points, the lights or saving your game. Number 8, Clock's Haunting Ground. There's nothing I like more than when developers find creative and unique ways to give us Easter eggs to previous projects. For example, Haunting Ground is a survival horror and stealth horror game that was heavily inspired by Clock Tower. In fact, Haunting Ground is essentially the spiritual successor to the Clock Tower franchise, as it shares a lot of the similarities with that franchise, including the fact that the game follows a female protagonist running from stalker enemies inside of a massive castle or mansion. So to acknowledge the inspiration and influence that this game took from the Clock Tower series, the saving method of Haunting Ground is in the form of clocks scattered throughout the castle. To the casual fan, this Easter egg might easily be overlooked, but to fans that grew up playing the Clock Tower franchise, this was a clever and fun way to pay tribute to the franchise that inspired this fantastic horror game. Number 7, Chilling by a Fireplace, Crow Country. I'm pretty sure this save method has been used before, but if I'm being honest with you guys, I can't think of where else I've seen this before, and I'm kind of getting deja vu about this, as if there was another game that did do this. So let me know in the comments down below if you know another survival horror game that did something similar to this. Because yeah, I'm beating myself up right now not knowing the answer to this, so let me know in the comments if I'm just crazy or if there is another game that kind of saves similar to how Crow Country does it. Either way, Crow Country is a classic indie survival horror game made with PS1 graphics to get us with that nostalgia. Sweet, sweet nostalgia. And as with most classic survival horror games, in order for the player to save their game, they'll need to find a save room that has a fireplace in it. Okay, that's a little different. In order to save, you just have to take a seat on a nearby couch and take in the vibe of being near a fireplace or some sort of torch for a bit while you save your game. Simple, yet memorable nonetheless. Actually, saving next to the fireplace reminds me of all the different iconic fireplace set pieces I've come across in the Resident Evil franchise for some reason, which ironically there's a lot of them. Number 6, Pay the Puppet, Elisa. Elisa is one of the better classic styled indie survival horror games inspired by the likes of Resident Evil. However, instead of zombies and monsters, you're dealing with creepy puppets and puppeteers. Anyway, the save method of this game is actually tied to another fun mechanic inspired by Resident Evil 4, the Merchant. Like RE4, the puppets of Elisa can sell her different items, weapons, and resources. However, unlike the Merchant in RE4, you could also use your money to save your game as well. This is vital as this is the only way you can save your game. Thankfully, saving doesn't cost much and you definitely have plenty of wheels to spare, but it's a nice little feature that I found pretty clever and hilarious at the same time. Number 5, Mirrors, The Evil Within. In both Evil Within games, Sebastian finds himself inside of two different versions of STEM, a system that connects people's minds and creates a shared reality or world of some kind. In both games, Sebastian eventually comes across mirrors that transports him to a safe haven. Here, Sebastian can save, upgrade his abilities, and retrieve valuables with keys found throughout the game. While the game does allow the player to save at the end of each chapter, and it does feature checkpoints as well, using the mirrors to access the safe haven is the only way to manually save your game. On top of that, this safe haven, in different ways depending on which game you are playing, allows the player to experience unique details about Sebastian's past as well as other important dialogue options that can only be experienced here in the safe haven. Number 4, Bucket Nights, Rural Rose. Rural Rose is without a doubt one of the best classic survival horror games out there, and it's a damn shame that so many people have yet to experience this game. That discussion is for a different video though, as today we are talking about the save method of Rural Rose, and that of course are the Bucket Nights. Much like a Typewriter in Resident Evil, the Bucket Nights appears in most save rooms alongside an inventory box. However, what makes the Bucket Night a little different outside of its goofy appearance is the fact that it can also provide clues and hints to help aid the player throughout the game. Obviously, the most important use for it is to manually save your game, but I can't think of a more unique saving method in a survival horror game than that of a knight made from a bucket and a broom who can also talk. Nice. Number 3, Telephones, Parasite Eve 2. Parasite Eve isn't the first or only game to use telephones as a save method in a survival horror game. In fact, Alien Isolation used emergency phones to save your game as you're trying to avoid the extremely dangerous and terrifying Xenomorph. However, what really makes Parasite Eve 2 specifically stand out from other survival horror games that uses phones as a save method is the way that the player is treated to hidden dialogue between Aya and other characters in the game, such as Pierce and Jody. That's because every time the player saves the game, it's in the form of Aya calling headquarters to update them on the situation in Dryfield. It's a small detail, but one of which I actually really appreciated and remembered, hence, today's topic. Number 2, The Red Squares, Silent Hill 2 Remake. While there have been plenty of iconic save methods in the Silent Hill franchise, from cult symbols to Room 302, the save method that stuck with me the most from the Silent Hill franchise is none other than Silent Hill 2's Red Squares. More specifically, the remake's version of it. While both save methods provide a feeling of uneasiness as we stare at James while we save our game, the remake changes things up a little more than that, at least for me personally, and I found it a bit more intriguing. For one, instead of a still image of James's face, we are treated to an animation of James standing around while we finish saving. And to go one step farther, a few things change depending on when and where we are saving the game. For example, the first time we save in front of Maria, we hear her calling to James and saying that he was in some sort of trance. And later in the game, after certain events, James's demeanor will change in which his eyes would look away from us instead of looking at us. These small things make me appreciate the save method more than any other save method in the Silent Hill franchise. Number 1, Typewriter, Resident Evil. Alright, we're here at the most iconic and well-known entry when it comes to save methods in survival horror games. I mean, obviously, the Typewriter from Resident Evil is the most iconic, most popular, most known, all of the above when it comes to, save methods in survival horror games. For anybody that either lives under a rock though, or has never played any Resident Evil game that feature manual saves, the Typewriter is the indisputable champion of the most iconic save method in a survival horror game. See, throughout certain Resident Evil titles, the players will need to locate ink ribbons if they want to save their game. These ink ribbons are limited, especially in harder difficulties, so players would need to choose wisely when to save and when to conserve that precious resource. Everything about saving on a Typewriter is so nostalgic, all the way down to the sound that the Typewriter makes as it's saving your game and typing out the file name. In fact, I would argue that a majority of save methods that we talked about today were heavily inspired by Resident Evil's Typewriter in some way, including the fact that the save rooms these typewriters would appear in have featured their own iconic save room theme. Well, that's it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Obviously, the typewriter from Resident Evil is easily the most iconic and most popular save method from a survival horror game, but I'd love to know which save method is your personal favorite in a survival horror game. Did it make my list? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.